Today, I ask the ultimate question. How much freaking removal do I need in my commander deck? But just before we get into the video for today, if you are enjoying the content that I'm putting out there, please do consider subscribing, turning on that notifications. It really helps us out. But with that being said, let's get right on into the video for today. All right, so here we go. I've done a few videos now, one with ramp, one with card draw and whatnot, and discussing why you need 10 of each. And I think sort of they're very synergistic to each other in that sense of like you need those sorts of numbers at minimum. Some decks want more ramp and some decks want more card draw than 10. But certainly just starting at 10, that number is like the baseline of like where I think you actually need to be just for your deck to sort of function for the most part. That's what a lot of people sort of recommend. But now this is where we're coming to like a bit of a discussion about the number. And I think the number has changed quite a lot over the last few years. And now I'm mainly talking about single target removal here. So I'm not really talking about board wipes because I still think that it depends what kind of deck you're running for board wipes. If you're in a very sort of slow, controlling, or combo-centric deck, that you want probably more board wipes and whatnot than what somebody who's running a more aggressive or quote-unquote mid-range-ish deck would be wanting board wipes. Because, again, if you're in that controlling, comboing deck, well, you can just afford to run more Wraths because, again, like the few creatures that you will have, for the most part, will not be worried. You won't be worried about them really dying that much, and you'll be much more worried about your opponents having a lot more things and whatnot than what you can sort of deal with. So having more Wraths in those decks is a bit more useful to you. Whereas in an aggro sort of mid-range-ish sort of style of decks in Commander, having 2 or 3 or so is probably the right number. I'm not really going to go back into this again, I don't really think, with another video talking about how many board wipes and whatnot, but that's one of those things. It's one of those big things, though, about single target removal, however, that like I think a few years ago when a few people were saying, like 5 removal spells would be, decent-ish and whatnot. And then I was seeing like the command zone, I think, saying, maybe you should double that number. And I was like, dude, that sounds like way too many. It sounds like you're getting up there to, the point of being like, well, we need as much removal as we need as ramp, and it's like, well, now I've kind of changed that tune and been like, well, maybe you should just run as much as you can sort of possibly run. But it's also kind of difficult because it's kind of like, well, one of those things, and I think I've come around a bit more on this ship a little bit than where I was a little bit a few months back or whatnot, especially with counter spells, I guess. But I think counter spells are the more egregious version of this problem that I sort of find with removal. It's like, oh, cool, I have this removal. I don't really need this removal because my opponents currently have not very much of anything that I'm too worried about. I really need more gas, more ramp, more card draw, or more bombs or whatnot to sort of get ahead, close out this game or whatnot or whatever, or get back into this game or sort of whatnot. So having all this removal doesn't really do me a whole lot in certain circumstances. Now, yes, sure, there are those circumstances do come up quite a lot where I do need that removal, so it is worth running it. But at a certain point, you do find it like, well, all I'm doing is top decking all of these, kill spells, and there's basically nothing to kill, especially if you're running like a Cascade style deck and whatnot. This is why, again, I didn't really want to run counter spells in like my deck that has sort of a cascading sort of an effect to it, because it's like, well, if I cascade into this counterspell, it basically just is a dead card. So, like, I don't want that in the deck. So it's like another reason not to run it. At least if I run into this sort of semi-bad removal spell to a degree, at least it's a free removal spell along with my creature when I'm cascading. So I kind of felt like that was a bit better of a trade-off in a sense, even though it's not the most exciting thing sometimes, or it's something that you go, well, there's nothing really to kill right now, so it is a bit of a dead hit. But then again, a lot of times you can find that permanent if you really go, well, maybe I'll just kill that thing because I can. I have the opportunity to, and I might as well, and maybe I'll get that spell back later. And that's one of those things, like, as I sort of say, I don't think you should ever just use your removal willy-nilly. I always think you should use your removal when it is absolutely 100% necessary, if something is going to kill you, or if something is going to prevent you from winning, or is going to prevent you from, like, enacting your game plan or whatnot. If it's slowing somebody else down more than you, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Well, this isn't really affecting me. Like, I've had a few times where somebody's played some of these, hate pieces like Kataki or whatnot, and some of these other artifact hate cards and whatnot, other things like that. And I'm like, okay, cool. That slowed me down for like a turn or two, but for some reason, all I did was top deck lands when I really needed to. So I never really got behind or whatnot. I didn't top deck them, but I top decked them when I needed them after I drew something else or whatnot sometimes. So that meant that I kept lands flowing throughout, drawing more cards throughout the game. And I never really ran out of lands. So that one or two turns maybe where, I could have used that mana rock or whatnot that I did have out wasn't really that hurtful to me. So I didn't really need that removal for that creature, and it was hurting one of my other opponents, who would have probably just like, oh, cool, here's my Krenko, I win, lol, if they had have been able to use their mana rocks and whatnot. So it really slowed them down into, not really being able to do a whole lot. So it meant I actually got the chance to actually be able to put up my defenses for that Krenko when it finally did come down and whatnot and things like that, so that I could actually, protect myself and actually, try to win. And in fact, I did win in that game because I didn't kill the person's thing that was sort of slowing me down a little bit, but then I just drew lands, so it just didn't hurt me enough to warrant my, attention, and it was hurting my other opponent way more. So I was just like, well, it's actually beneficial to me in this position. So, there are times that some of these quote-unquote threats or whatnot, or some of these cards that you would think to yourself, well, surely I want to remove this card or whatnot because it's restricting me using one of my permanents or whatnot, or using my cards in the best way that I can. But sometimes it's helping you because it's also, restricting one of your opponents. Like, there's all these cards that try to make the game more quote-unquote fair. And, like, I do like playing in a fair way, but, of course, I want to be taking the most advantage of it or whatnot. I want to, play my whole hand or whatnot, and then play something that says, hey, people can only cast one spell per turn. So that I've dumped most of my hand, especially if you've got something that's like sneak attacking things in and whatnot, that gets around these sort of things, so that you're not really casting more than one spell. So you're just like, oh, okay, cool, I'm still going to get, 2 or 3 creatures snuck attack in from my hand onto the battlefield or whatnot. I'm not casting them. So that gets around this. If you've got all of these things to being like, oh, okay, cool, yes, it is a bit of a hindrance in a sense, but I will be doing this other thing that will, bring stuff onto my battlefield in other ways, like graveyard shenanigans and whatnot. So it doesn't really hurt me that much to only be able to cast one spell per turn. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. And it really hurts my opponents a lot more than, what it will hurt me, because again, I've got the chance to build around some of these sort of cards, so I know know when I can do these sorts of things and when I can't or whatnot. So, but again, it is one of those things about removal that most of the time you want to kill these things that do stop you from, enacting your gameplay. Janeth Magistrate comes out. Okay, cool, we've got to kill that so I can get my commander out and whatnot. And it's one of those things that's like, well, I don't really want to go down to the line of like going through removal and being like, dude, do I have to run Fatal Push or just Lightning Bolt to just kill Draenith Magistrate and some of these cards like that sometimes? Because that's the point at which it sort of becomes, like too much for me and certainly some other people as well. I don't want to run Fatal Push or just Lightning Bolt or cards like this that are not very good or very situational for the most part. And again, I'm not playing in that, super huge, highly competitive meta or that upper echelons for the most part. I'm just playing, a game and I get that, again, removal and interaction is good and whatnot, and you should use what you can, but again, certain colors don't have a lot, and certain colors surprisingly have quite a bit when you would think they wouldn't have as much as what they do. Blue actually has quite a bit of decent creature removal, single target creature removal. I didn't really think much of Pongify and Rapid Hybridization at first a few years ago and whatnot. Again, probably because I wasn't a huge fan of blue. But in the last few years, I've come to be like, dude, these are like blues like Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile, dude. These are 1 mana, instant speed, kill somebody's thing, and they get a random frog or whatever, a random ape. And like, I know with the new one from Strixhaven, that they get a 4/4. That's one of the ones that has the most quote unquote relevant body. But even that, it's like exile a creature, exile an artifact. That's really good. And like, if a 4/4 with no other text is the thing that's beating you, then there's something seriously wrong. Like, literally, that's what I started to realize. Like, with some of these cards, like, if you give your opponent some of these, like, little things, and that's the thing that beats you, then surely there's something wrong. Because, like, Fateful Absence, again, like, they get a clue. That should be totally irrelevant for the most part, most of the time, because they have to pay 2 mana to draw 1 card. Wow. Well, will they ever do that? Probably not. Maybe they will at some point. If they're an artifact deck, maybe they'll care about the artifact for 5 seconds, or if they're not in green, maybe they'll care about the artifact for 5 seconds. Maybe if they're in green, they'll have something that comes down and just destroys all artifacts or whatnot, or destroys artifacts or whatnot. Things like that. So it's just one of those things. It's like, I bring this back to running things like what is it called? Running cards like Rexage and things like that, or Acidic Slime and things like this. I don't want to run just these sort of very medium, for the most part, spells. Like, Rexage is good maybe in an Elf deck or a Reanimator deck, but again, it's sorcery speed. I don't want this sorcery speed answer for the most part, most of the time. There's that Foundation Breaker, which is basically the same sort of thing, but it is evocable. That's, again, good in certain decks like Muldrotha, Meren, etc., blah, blah, blah. It's certainly good in Omnath decks, because, again, your elemental dies, you can shoot something for 3 as well, which is pretty good, and whatnot. But, again, like, I don't want to run these sorts of things because they're bad, these bad sorcery speed answers, and for the most part, they're 3+ mana. Foundation Breaker's 2 if you evoke it, and whatnot. So, but again, I don't want to run those bad sorcery speed answers, because there are some all right sorcery speed answers to a degree, but again, I wouldn't want to run a sorcery speed answer, because what if the thing that I'm like going to blow up now is the, not the thing that I really needed to worry about for the most part. I want to know what the most important thing is that I need to blow up, right here, right now. Okay, cool. He's played that. That's definitely the most important thing that I need to blow up right now. Like, he's just cast this and he's going to combo off with this or whatnot. Oh, that other card that I thought, oh, well, that could be a real problem, didn't turn out to be. So, like, I want to be able to react at that instant speed, to be able to be like, okay, cool, I can deal with this thing and be able to save myself. Like, I know I'm saving my other two opponents in the game, but again, sometimes that is a good thing in a sense, but it's also one of those things where you've saved yourself and potentially be able to, crack back to win the game somehow, and whatnot. So you get that opportunity at least, because otherwise, without, answers, it's like, well, what can you do? And that's one of those things. But again, it's so hard to come up to me to be like, okay, I'm going to just run, 10 removal spells, single target removal spells. It feels like that's too much. I don't know how many removal spells. It does depend how many colors you're in as well. You can actually fit into a deck without it affecting the strategy of said deck. Like, and this comes down to how many threats, I guess, you come up against in a game of Commander. Because if the board is full of a whole ton of things, it's just like, okay, this board is way too clogged. This single target removal spell isn't going to do me a whole lot. Yes, right now I could get rid of somebody's Nyxbloom Ancient or something that's a big threat, and that would be useful for that. But beyond that, I just actually need to kill probably a whole bunch of things. And yes, I know tutors sort of help this out when you're like, okay, cool, I need a Wrath or whatnot, or I need a kill spell or whatnot. This helps out the math a little bit if you have those tutors and whatnot. But, when you don't have those tutors and you're like looking at your deck and going, well, I think this comes down to your play group a lot of the time, or the type of play group that you want to play with this deck that you're discussing. So I think there's lots of different answers for lots of different play groups and powers. So that's where I'm at with this at the moment. Just in my opinion and my way of doing things now, I've actually pushed myself up quite a bit. I actually sort of wanted to cut out Beast Within and Generous Gift from one of my decks, because I was just like, yes, these are pretty good because they hit anything, but they're 3 mana. And I was just like, well, what are the main things that I actually come up against? Creatures, artifacts, and enchantments. Sometimes planeswalkers, very rarely lands, and whatnot. So, like, planeswalkers, I don't super duper need to worry about them for the most part, because, like, unless, like, you've got Doubling Season and a lot of these other things out, they're not that problematic. So all I need to do is keep punching them down and punching them down, which can be annoying sometimes and whatnot, but still. And if they do go off, they go off anyway. So for the most part, I really can't do that much. And even if I do, like, killing one planeswalker sometimes doesn't really do anything, because again, there's a lot of graveyard recursion in those decks, so it just doesn't matter sometimes. You really need to kill the key pieces and whatnot before they really get them together. And, like, again, if they get the right cards to recur them from the graveyard anyway, it's like, well, you basically just didn't do anything, and things like that. So it can be really annoying and whatnot. But again, for the most part, you've just got to hope that you can survive, get to the point of being like, okay, cool, well, this is this thing that, most people aren't running, 50, 60 planeswalkers or whatever it is in their deck, whatever, even 30 planeswalkers in their deck. Most people are maybe running 1 or 2, maybe 5 planeswalkers in their deck, so it's never really that big of an issue. And some planeswalkers, again, like, I'm fine giving people that incremental value out of, if that's all somebody's doing or whatnot with their planeswalker, for the most part, or if it's just one of the worst planeswalkers that's just sort of like doesn't really have an ult or whatever, or doesn't really tick up or do anything too scary, like, or if it doesn't really stop me from doing anything too much. Maybe if it taxes me, that's fine, or whatnot. I'll probably leave it alone. If it stops me tutoring and I'm a really tutor heavy sort of deck, then maybe I want to care about that to a degree. If it's milling me and exiling my graveyard, and I'm a graveyard deck, then that's probably going to be bad for me, or whatnot. But again, for the most part, like, you've just got to hope for the best to a degree, with most of them, especially when you do come across those planeswalkers, because they're few and far between, to be honest. I find there's only a few people that actually run dedicated planeswalker decks, despite how popular they sort of are, because they are a difficult archetype to play, and I've tried to play them. They're very difficult to play, and whatnot. So yeah, but again, it is what it is. But anyway, like, looking at, what I was like facing in my metagame, I was just like, okay, I really face creatures and I really face artifacts and enchantments that I need to worry about. Like, for the most part, like, again, if somebody has like Cabal Coffers or Gaia's Cradle or whatnot, well, a board wipe kills kills all their creatures and kills all of their mana that they're getting from Gaia's Cradle as well, to that extent. No, Cabal Coffer's a bit different, but again, you've kind of got to just do the same sort of thing. Kill everything that they sort of play, because it sort of negates kind of what they've done for the most part. Because if they play something for 8 mana or whatever it is, as long as it's not Torment of Halfar and it's just sort of killing everyone, or Exsanguinate just killing everyone, things like this, then it's probably fine, because you're just like, well, let's go and see if we can, take everything down that you've been trying to do to us, and make sure that we can survive and keep going and whatnot, by just killing everything that you did, so that, you don't really get further and further ahead. Like, you'll be able to, play more cards next turn, but eventually you'll get empty-handed and you'll run out of gas. You'll have all this mana, but nothing really to play with it, or you'll just be stuck top decking or whatnot. So that'll really starve you of like being able to be super effective in the game for a long time, and that'll give us, that chance to be like, okay, cool, let's see who can win and whatnot. And things like that. So that, that's where I came to deciding that was the way that I wanted to go. Maybe it's not the best way to decide to go with that deck, but it was such a tight list and so difficult to sort of figure out anything that I wanted to kind of take out. And I really wanted to slim down the mana of that deck to that degree, to be like, okay, I've got all these big stuff, but now I need, all of this, other stuff to sort of round it out and thin out and whatnot. So I was kind of really worried about, having these 3-drop spells that, yes, they have some utility, but again, were kind of like, well, they're not super necessary for the most part. I can get the same effect out of, a lot of other cards for the cards that I'm mostly using these on. So I just thought, well, that's better for me. I don't know. It just seems like I always kill some creature or artifact or enchantment with Generous Gift or Beast Within. So, like, the other things just didn't come up enough. Now, with a deck that has less colors, like, 2 colors or whatnot, not like that 4-color deck, it's like, well, now I can run those cards, because now I don't have access to, as many other kill spells as what that 4-color or 5-color deck or whatever that I was building will have, because again, you have so many options. And it also, again, is like that deck, well, I was trying to be like as powerful kind of and efficient with what I was doing as possible for the most part. And this other deck is like, oh yes, it still is really efficient and powerful at doing what it's doing, but since you have less options and whatnot, it's like, well, I can easily play these cards as well. That's fine, and they'll still be useful in certain circumstances, and I won't be too disappointed to have to pay for them 3 mana or whatnot in this deck, because again, I do need that extra other option where I don't have access to this color or that color, so I can't squeeze this other card into this sort of deck. So I hope that long-winded sort of answer sort of is kind of useful. So to sort of clarify and recap, I guess, if you're building for a casual, I'm saying very casual table, here for the most part, I would just stick to 5. Like if you're looking at a precon or maybe just an upgraded precon, I would stick to the 5 removal spells. And even if you're building like a 6 or a 7, that's usually roughly where a precon to an upgraded precon, lands in that 6 to 7 range. That's where I would be looking to be like, okay, that's fine. 5 or so spells that are single target that kill something. If you're looking for 7 or higher, I would suggest that you start looking at maybe 7. And if you're looking at even more than higher power levels, then you basically just need to run every spell that you can use that deals with something pretty cleanly, for the most part, and just not worry about anything else, because then it's like, well, even though again I'm trying to be as thin as possible as far as like mana curve and things like this, being that ability to hit anything, like this is where I find Chaos Warp and some of these other cards aren't as good. There are cards that are like Chaos Warp, like Generous Gift, Beast Within, etc., Fateful Absence. Some of these other cards that do give the opponent Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile even, that gives the opponent something, but it's not nearly as bad as just, what, like Chaos Warp can be, because Chaos Warp can be very hit and miss with what it gives the opponent. Sometimes it gives them a random land or basically nothing in a sense, so they just reveal the top card and then look at it and be like, oh, cool, it's a land, so I don't do anything and nothing really happens. Other times they'll, like, cast into something better or even the same thing, so it's just like, well, that kind of sucks. I know some people like Tybalt's Trickery and cards like that, but I don't. Again, I'm not one for counter spells and whatnot, but again, like, it's one of those things where at least this spell that you have got, you are getting rid of that spell that they are casting. So it is better than Chaos Warp in my opinion. Plus it's 2 mana. So, but again, it is that you only can do it on the stack. So at least Chaos Warp, you can get it once it's on the field. Like, I actually like Divide by Zero a little bit, but I still think that that's a bit too much. But at least you get to, like, loot, I guess, or whatnot. So that is a bit of an upside to that card. But anyway, that is pretty much it for this one. As I said here today, you guys can let me know what you guys think about how much removal you need to run in your decks. And again, I do think it is somewhat power level dependent or whatnot, and perhaps playstyle dependent, because some people are very much more like removal freaks or whatnot. I don't know. They're much more into just like, I'll kill that. What is that? I don't know. I'll kill it. Kill it now. Kill it with fire. Oh, cool. Now I've got nothing in my hand. Oh, okay, cool. Now I'm dead because now I give everyone all these frogs and whatnot or whatever. Oh, well, sad now. But whatever. Like, I killed everything. Woo, got me. But yeah, it's one of those things. But anyway, guys, as I said, you can let me know all your thoughts right down there below. I'll be sure to respond to all your thoughts down there. I really love interacting with you guys, talking about EH and all these geeky things that we love. So yeah, see you down there in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.